We are pretentious. We are book snobs. We are lit bros, and we are brodernists. So today we are going to be talking about the books that we've read that are probably beneath us, but we still enjoyed anyway. This is our Guilty Pleasures Reads episode. How many did you bring along with you today?
I brought 3 with me.
Okay.
I do have a couple that I could add to the list,
Yes.
but I just don't have the book anymore.
Perfect, because I have 3 physical books with me, and I have 2 that I wanted to mention that I don't have physical copies of.
Perfect.
So we're going to each discuss our 5 Guilty Pleasure reads, but as always, we will be starting with our weekly reading update. By the way, my name is Tony. This is the Life on Books podcast. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
We're off to a hot start today.
Yeah, I assume everybody knows who we are at this point. We're pretty famous.
Yeah, we're kind of a big deal.
Actually, shout out to Karen, who works at a bookstore in California, the one which I do not know the name of, but Buddy in our book club, which you can join below. The link is in the description. He said
What a seamless plug.
Yeah, he was in a bookstore yesterday, and he asked if they had any Clarice Lispector.
Yeah.
And this woman, Karen, said no, but like props to you for knowing who that is. And she was like, do you listen to the Life on Books podcast? Because they talk about her all the time.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, wow, that's actually kind of mind-blowing to me.
That is cool. There was one time I posted in the Roberto Bolano subreddit.
Yes.
Because we were reading Savage Detectives, or I might have just finished it, but it was around the time of the book club.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, reading this, loving it. I am looking forward to reading 2666 in the future. Is there any recommended reading order for some of his shorter books, in between the two or whatever? And someone commented I've been reading Savage Detectives with my book club.
And it was,
and I was like, does it happen? You, and I unfortunately did not get the person's name, but I was like, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Out in the wild.
My next kind of bingo card thing is if I go into a bookstore and somebody recognizes me from social media. I think that'll be kind of funny.
That would be cool.
But anywho, what have you been reading?
Well, I'm going to defer to you first because one of the books that I recently read and would put in my reading recap is also one of the books that I was going to talk about today. So I'll just segue.
Okay, so yeah, I'll go over mine, then you can go over yours and do that book last.
Yeah, and we'll just jump right into.
So I did finish The Flanders Road by Claude Simon. This was an incredibly challenging read, perhaps maybe the most difficult book I've read. Not quite as difficult as Gravity's Rainbow, and we are 3 minutes in here.
Nice.
But I haven't finished Gravity's Rainbow, so I wouldn't. I mean, obviously, I could tell the writing is more dense, but I'm just going to count this as books I've completed. This one was very, very challenging.
Nice.
Although I will give myself a little bit of a pat on the back because I read the introduction after I finished, which is what I typically do since introductions these days more or less spoil the books.
Yep.
And the introduction kind of goes over what the book is about and some of the key points. And I was like, I actually did get those.
Yeah.
So good for me, I guess.
You're wicked smart.
Yeah. A few people have asked me what makes this book so challenging to read. And it's a combination of things. First, there is a lot of, I would say, obscure language choices. So words that I had to look up I wasn't familiar with. There is also basically no punctuation.
Nice.
It's minimal.
Yeah.
Occasionally he would use quotation marks for dialogue, but not always. There's maybe a dozen total periods in all 200 pages of this book. And what will happen is he'll start a thought, and then in that thought we'll mention something, and then we'll go on a 6-page tangent about that one thing, and then come back to the original thought, and you've completely forgotten what he was even talking about. It's completely nonlinear. There's sections that are happening in current time, and then he's elucidating about something that happened before and then thinking about what might happen next. And it's all just kind of put together that way. Yeah, it's an interesting book. There's a lot of little really hidden gems in there, like just beautiful thoughts and ideas and language.
Yeah.
But in general, it was very challenging to read, which ironically made this feel like YA in comparison, which is JR by William Gaddis, which I'm about 140 pages into. Hey, Editor Tony here. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Life on Books podcast. I wanted to jump in really quick to tell you that NYRB, one of our favorite indie publishers, has been kind enough to pass on a discount code for our audience, which is 10% off their entire catalog when you go to their site. All you have to do is use code LifeOnBooks at checkout to get 10% off. But heads up, the coupon code is only good through April 18th to the 22nd, so you don't have much time. And if you want an additional 10% off, so 20% total, if my math is correct, that is for book club members. There's an additional code that gets you 20% off, but you have to be part of our book club. You can join. The link is down below. We have an awesome community where we post additional content, including extra podcast episodes, full-length reviews of books, deep dives on different subjects, and we have an incredible Discord server and community. If all of that sounds good to you, sign up at the link below, or if you just want 10% off your next NYRB order, head over to the site and use code LifeOnBooks at checkout, and comment down below what you ended up getting. Now, back to the episode. Still loving this, but didn't touch it much this week just because I was working my way through that. But you know, this is also a challenging book, but in like such a different way.
Yes.
The language itself is not complicated in JR, but it's all unattributed dialogue.
Right.
So
that was one of my favorite things about JR, particularly, and then Gaddis in general. Like, you know, some of the exposition and prose, like it gets pretty dense.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's not a ton of that in JR, but you know, in something like the recognitions or what have you, it can get pretty dense and complex and things like that. But it's really stands out in JR the way he just like nails general dialogue.
yeah,
You know,
very much so.
obviously all of the characters in here are kind of caricatures, but he really has captures those voices.
I agree.
So
Yeah, it's also there's no indication of when there's a scene change.
right.
So
That's challenging for sure.
That makes it challenging, but I think he gives the reader enough context to understand that you're not in the classroom anymore. Now you're, you know, in somebody's house or whatever.
Right.
And then lastly, I've been reading this month's book club pick, which is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Naja Maria Aidt, who's a Danish author. About halfway through, it's different.
It's a book.
It's a book. Probably not one that it's not going to end up in my top 10 reads for the year. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
The plot is kind of interesting. Like, I'm curious to see where it's going, but all of the characters are unlikable. And I would say the writing itself is very plain and underwhelming. I'm actually a little surprised that Open Letter published this one because it's like so normal compared to a lot of the books I've read from them, which are a lot more adventurous and experimental. And when we had Chad on the podcast from Open Letter, he talked about why he loves works in translation. And he was like, yeah, in other cultures and countries, they are not following such conventional norms in writing. So it makes it more interesting. And like, this is
very conventional.
It's kind of like a smut / mystery, like crime novel. And I know crime novels are very popular in Scandinavia. That's a very popular genre. And they can certainly be literary for whatever that means. But this is like, I don't know. There was one sentence where the protagonist, Thomas, is like walking around the city and it's like, oh, a cool chill went up his back and it gave him an erection. It's just like, what? Like, what does that have to do with anything, you know?
Okay. I mean, good for Thomas.
And yeah, so anyway, I'll reserve final judgment for when I finish it. It's a very easy read.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I read like 80 pages yesterday in about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So which
Yeah.
is fast for me.
Yeah. I guess technically I also have read Rock, Paper, Scissors this week.
Yeah.
It's certainly not 80 pages worth.
Yeah.
My feelings are pretty similar to yours. It's unfortunately just not really moving the needle for me one way or the other.
Yeah.
I don't really feel strongly enough about it to like critique it. But I also don't feel like all that compelled to read it.
Yeah.
I think the strongest emotion it gives me is guilt when I pick up something else and look at Rock, Paper, Scissors sitting there. I'm like, I should be reading this for the book club, but I mean,
the good news is if you were compelled to do so, you could sit down and knock it out in an hour or two.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think you probably read a little bit faster than I do. So, I guess on the that is like one other pro of that. Like neither of us enjoyed Carpentaria last month, but that wasn't necessarily like a hard read, but it was certainly more dense. Than this, where it's like, okay, I'm not loving this, but I'll still finish it just because it's a simple read and I'm curious enough.
I could read that while I have the Red Sox on.
Yeah. So, all right. So what else have you been reading this week?
So, similar to last week, I read a bunch this week. I finished Malina by Ingeborg Bachmann. It was good. I don't think I understood a lot of it.
Yeah.
I know our good friend Seth was a big fan of it. I would say I certainly was not as affected by it as he was, but still an enjoyable read.
He has very esoteric tastes.
Yeah. I finished the Adventures and Misadventures of Juan Orpi, which was just kind of a fun, dumb book.
Yeah, it's the type of book where it's enjoyable enough while you're reading it, but it doesn't leave you with a whole lot to say about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little
twist at the ending.
Yeah. I finished that. I finished The Secret of Evil, which was Bolano's kind of just a collection of short stories and stuff that was published posthumously. There were some good stories in there, some others that didn't really affect me at all.
Yeah.
Which is pretty typical of most short story collections I read, I think. So,
yeah.
I read Ultramarine by Mariette Navarro, translated from the French by Yves Hill Agnes. This is from our friends at Deep Vellum.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Buddy in the book club read this and enjoyed it. What did you think?
I thought it was great.
Cool.
I thought it was really awesome. And it's a short book. It's 160 pages, maybe 150. I read it in pretty much a single sitting yesterday with some breaks to flip my laundry around.
Cool.
But a really good book, really enjoyable.
When was this originally written? Do you know?
I don't.
The English edition is 2025, and 2021 was.
Yeah, I was going to say the French was pretty recent. So
cool.
But a good book. I would recommend it for sure. What else? I chipped away at a little bit more of the of Attila by Aliocha Coll.
Nice.
I have no idea what I'm reading.
Yeah. Cool. Good.
But it's cool. Read a little bit of the USA Trilogy by Joan dos Passos.
Yep.
I'm really enjoying that.
Nice.
And what's nice about that, the actual book itself is like almost 1,200 pages. But it is technically 3 novels in one volume. So like there are some kind of clear stopping points.
Yeah.
If I need a break. I haven't hit any of them yet, but I've got about 100 pages left in book 1. So
nice.
I may take a short break, but just for variety's sake, it's not like it's the most challenging thing I've ever read. So I don't feel like I need to let my brain rest. And then also this week, my first book that
before you get to that.
Yeah.
We're going to keep the suspense going a little bit longer.
Oh boy.
Somebody left a comment on last week's episode, and I want to read it to you and get your official response because it was in regards to something that you had said specifically. Let's see if I can find it here.
I'm going to assume I said something dumb and opinionated.
This episode actually got quite a bit of commentary on it. So.
Yeah, I was briefly looking at the comments, and it seemed like there was some good response to what we were saying about how the author unfairly left out a lot of female writers.
Someone said don't read Sanderson. So there's that. This is completely unrelated to what I want to say, but somebody says, LA has no bearing on my life. Quite the opposite. I live my life in opposition to their worldview, which if you live your life in opposition to their worldview, then they do have a bearing on your life, because without them, you can't oppose it.
Their point of reference. So.
That's right. That's right. It's very meta of us to say. Okay. So this is from Dr. Benway 612. And he said,
"What's up, Doc?
Damn, bro, pick a book and stick with it. How do you get anything out of bouncing around like that? Do you want to comment on that?"
I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I probably don't get as much as I could. I'll be honest with you. But also, like, I don't think it's like super negatively affected me. Yeah, I don't know. I think it just I've done enough reading in my day that I can kind of remember what's going on. I think it's kind of a learned skill.
Yeah, I think my kind of common rebuttal to this point is we all went to school.
Yeah.
We had 4 to 7 different classes a week in school that we were reading different things for. I mean, it's just kind of how you do it.
The way it was, because I used to be a staunch, like, I've got to read one book at a time person. And the comparison someone made to me that kind of helped me turn the corner was, if you think about it, like, how many times are you watching one show at a time?
Right.
You know, probably have one like serious drama. And
if you're Andy, you have 5 or 6 reality TV shows.
And then, you have some like dumb, trashy reality TV.
Yep.
You maybe have like a comfort sitcom in rotation.
Yep. Keep going.
Maybe sometimes you mix in a movie, you know? And, you know, do you like frequently lose track of what's going on in those shows?
Right.
Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe, but, and the books I've been reading aren't like as easily categorized as like something serious, something comforting, or, you know, what have you. But like, I don't know. It works for me.
Yeah, I think the way I kind of think of this is, if I'm reading something, like let's say I have the entire day free and I'm just going to mostly read today. If I sit and read for more than an hour on one thing, I will then start to kind of space out a little bit.
Yeah.
Where if I put it down and just grab another book, even though I'm doing the same activity, it's kind of like you get that little dopamine hit,
right,
and it helps you to focus again. So you could make the argument that by switching up books, you're actually going to get more out of each book, because you're not going through those phases of like, oh, I just looked over this whole page and I wasn't even paying attention. I need to go back and reread it or whatever. So.
Yeah. And to go back to what I did yesterday, you know, I had not much going on in the afternoon. I probably should have done my taxes, but
they still got 2 days.
You know, I could have maybe read a bigger chunk of, you know, USA Trilogy, or like I said, picked up Rock, Paper, Scissors. But our good friend Kevin had sent me Ultramarine. He had a lot of great things to say about it. I knew you had told me that Buddy and I think Mike in the book club were big fans of it. And I was like, oh, this is a short book. Like, I picked up, I grabbed it like Thursday or Friday night and read the opening. And I was like, oh, this seems cool. So I read it.
Yeah. There you go.
I don't know. I've talked a lot before about the squirrels in my brain, and they've kind of taken control the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, squirrels are out of control. All right. So what is your last weekly reading update / first guilty pleasure book?
So I'm going to quantify it a little bit, because when we first started talking about this idea for a topic, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the term guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it's more books that we normally wouldn't read.
Right, right. Because to go back to one of the points that we touched on a lot last week, like, it's okay to like things.
It is, yeah.
And I don't really feel
Supposedly.
right. I don't really feel guilty for liking books.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just kind of thinking like more books that I enjoyed more than I expected, or maybe our audience at large wouldn't expect me to pick based off of the type of Broderness bullshit we talk about.
Yeah. And I to be honest, I am surprised not only that you chose to read this book, but that you loved it as much as you did.
Yeah. So anyway, talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. I started this sometime Sunday last weekend after I got home from recording the Broderness pod. After got home from that, I think it was that Sunday that I finished Malina, and maybe read some more of Attila, and I was just kind of like, I kind of just want something, I guess a good story,
Yeah.
And I didn't find it like super challenging. That Sunday I read like the first 100 or so pages, and I enjoyed it enough that I wanted to like keep reading it. And then I picked it up again on Monday, and as the story, was developing, I was like, I was really super into it, and I just like couldn't put it down the rest of the week.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to keep reading it. So it's obviously a classic of science fiction, which is not really a genre that I read ever.
Yeah.
And, certainly things about it that I was just kind of like, all right, if you say so.
Yeah.
But, I know you have your critiques of it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great book. And it was a good change of pace. So,
yeah, I think it's an interesting situation because it's one of those books where, and something very similar happened with Lonesome Dove, is you say anything critical about it, and people are like, I can't believe you didn't like that book.
yeah.
It's like, no, I did like it.
Right.
I just, here's some things I didn't like about it.
Right.
/ I do think it maybe is a little overrated.
Right.
I always do try to keep in mind the context of when the book was written, because this was hugely influential in the science fiction space. And so,
Right.
not that I've read a ton of science fiction, but I've read things mostly that have only come after that.
Right.
And so you have to keep in mind, like, even if you have some critiques about certain things, Frank was pioneering,
Yeah.
the genre.
Right.
But yeah, it's an interesting book. I do not feel compelled at all to read the 7 subsequent ones. Some of them written by him, some of them written by his son. I know that they get a little weird.
I've been told by numerous people that are fans of the series to largely ignore the ones that Brian, Frank Herbert's son, wrote.
Yeah.
Our good buddy Seth was a big fan of
Interesting.
Dune. And he said, this is another thing I've heard. He told me, and then I've heard from other people that are big fans, to at least read Dune Messiah,
yeah.
which is the follow-up.
Yep.
And really, I've been told completes Paul's arc.
Okay.
So I'd like to do that before making any judgments if I'm going to keep reading the entire series. I've heard that after that book is when things start to really go off the rails.
Yeah.
But I would like to read Dune Messiah,
Yeah.
and I'll get around to that eventually.
One thing I struggled with.
Plus, that's about half the length is this. So,
okay.
And if again, not to like criticize the writing, but I did not find it super difficult. I mean, obviously, I was able to read an almost 800-page book in a week. So
Right.
I should be able to knock Messiah out if it's similar.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, and this is going to sound very pretentious of me, but I made a video for like Instagram Reels and TikTok maybe like 5 or 6 months ago now, and it was like, hey, here's 3 science fiction books I'm thinking about reading. Like, which one would you read first? And it was Left Hand of Darkness, Children of Time, and Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And a lot of, and I mentioned like sci-fi is not like I'm not a big sci-fi reader. So like which of these three would you read first? And a lot of people were like, oh, I would recommend Dune, but you're probably not like ready to just like jump into that. And I was like, well, first of all, I've already read it.
Yeah.
Second of all, like, I don't know, like I didn't think it was that challenging of a book.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly would I not be ready for,
Yeah. Some of the, like, I guess, intricacies of the, quote, world building were things that I had to, like, something would be kind of explained in the first 100 pages. And then, like, it would kind of come back up 300 pages later. And I'd have to kind of remember, like, oh, this is what this person's deal is. Or, like, this is how the system works or what have you. And that was, I guess I would say, the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
But
yeah, my biggest critique with it is I thought the naming was so anachronistic of the characters. And so we were kind of having a little bit of a debate about this on the Discord. But I was saying, like, people either have these wild, clearly just fictionalized names that he came up with, or they're named like Paul.
Right.
Jessica.
Yeah.
And there are clearly still people named Paul and Jessica and Jenny and Susan or whatever some of the other kind of typical names are. But those are also like, those were like the big names of whenever this was written, like the 60s.
Yeah.
So it just felt really dated in that way. And I just thought it was a little corny. The worst being Duncan, Idaho. I mean, just what a cringe, corny ass name. And I said, like, it seems like Herbert came up with the names by either like tripping acid or he couldn't think of one and just like looked at the name on his neighbor's mailbox and was like, oh yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
Like, so whatever. Overall, good book. Obviously, hugely influential. Yeah. What did you think of did you watch both films?
I watched part 1.
Okay.
I have not watched part 2 yet.
I've only seen part 1 as well.
I thought it was good. Like all adaptations, there were obviously some changes.
Mm-hmm.
Some that I agreed with, disagreed with, was a little confused by.
Mm-hmm.
There were not any that I felt were like egregious and or unforgivable.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that opinion holds up when I get around to watching part 2.
Yeah, I think the film did a pretty good job.
But yeah, I thought it was a good adaptation for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was fairly faithful. They did a good job with it.
You watched the movie before reading the book, right?
I can't remember. They were very close to one another.
Yeah.
But I did think that like there wasn't really a need for there to be 2 films. Like they could have just put it in one and made it like, I just felt like the first film, like not much happens.
Yeah.
And so,
one of the things that I was thinking, like, and I don't remember when the first one came out, if they had like already said like, hey, we're making 2 movies out of this book.
I think they did. Yeah.
Because for me, and again, this is kind of a moot point because I, have read the book and I know that there's a second movie that is basically, an adaptation of the second half of the book.
Yeah.
But if you went into part 1 totally blind and didn't know any of the context, it would seem largely anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Like, this is it?
Right.
But again, like it's kind of a null and void because I know it's not.
Right.
I know there's more.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The other thing that kind of...
I'd also, at some point, probably after I've watched part 2, I'll make some time to go back and watch the David Lynch adaptation.
Classic. Very controversial film. Okay. So that is your first surprising read. I'm going to go... Well, actually, I'll stick with one. I'll start with one that I don't have a physical copy of because I'd listened to it on audiobook, which is World War Z by Max Brooks. And are you familiar with it?
I've heard of it. I know it's like about zombies.
Yeah, it's
more or less.
It's a post-apocalyptic zombie novel. But what's interesting about it is it doesn't really cover like the outbreak or the turmoil. Like everything's kind of done and settled.
Yeah.
And it's a series of reports, more or less. So every chapter is a different person giving recounting their experience through the conflict. And what's so interesting about the audiobook, and I don't know if there's multiple versions of the audiobook, but there is an edition of the audiobook where every chapter is voiced by a different actor.
That's cool.
And it's a lot of like famous voices that you would recognize. And that just made it like such a visceral experience. I don't know that I would have appreciated it as much if I had read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, like I said, there might be another audiobook edition that doesn't do that. It's just one narrator. And I think it would also lose quite a bit of its effect that way. Unfortunately, they also made a film adaptation of it, and it was terrible and basically had nothing to do with the original book other than the name.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned in the book, every chapter is a different person. The movie is like, here's Brad Pitt, and he's like going around trying to like stop the zombie apocalypse. And it's like, what? This has nothing to do with the book. Why did we call this World War Z? So really unfortunate, but that's been out for quite a while now too. I think that came out in the early 2000s. Let me look. And let me pull up the audiobook cast as well. So Alfred Molina, who's in quite a few films. Alan Alda, Carl Reiner, Henry Rollins, Mark Hamill, Martin Scorsese, Nathan Fillion, Simon Pegg.
Wow.
I mean, there's like a huge cast of John Turturro, Rob Reiner. So it's cool. If you have the chance to listen to it, I would recommend it. It's very good. So what's next on your surprising reads?
I'll pick one that I don't have the physical copy with me. The Sisters Brothers by Patrick DeWitt. Just kind of it's a Western. Very narrative driven. It was also adapted into a film.
Oh, wow.
Which I haven't seen.
Okay.
So I can't speak to how faithful it is or how good of a movie it was.
Yep. When did the film come out?
The film came out, I just looked it up, 2018.
Oh, so it's pretty recent.
Yeah. And the book was published in 2011.
Okay.
But it's about two brothers, the Sisters Brothers.
Yeah.
Who are kind of, cowboy assassins.
Okay.
So to speak.
Interesting.
And, they're on this, they've been hired to kill someone pretty much and kind of going along there, following their journey and things like that. And, one of them kind of wants to do the job. The other one kind of wants to get out of the game, so to speak, and just kind of following their travails and the hijinks and stuff they get into.
Yeah.
Another like relatively short book. Nothing over the top about the writing. Just kind of a fun narrative. Something for kind of when you need a break. Yeah. So,
Western, a genre you don't usually read, and published in 2011. Modern.
Yeah.
So, checks two boxes there.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Cool. Next for me is another one I did on audiobook, which is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And again, I think that this is probably better as an audiobook than reading it as a written text, because there is, I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's just some things that being able to hear it, it is just definitely better than reading it. So, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go too much into detail about why that is. Kind of a unique story. Well written in the sense that it's very engaging and gripping, but also, ironically, I will say I think this book is a little overrated, because people talk about like, this is the best book I've ever read. It's a little bit of a one-trick pony in the sense that in kind of the most like classical structure for storytelling is like problem, attempt to solve the problem that fails, readjustment, overcome the problem, and then like growth as a result. And the entire book is literally just like that sequence like a dozen times, which is fine. But it's definitely how he like keeps the reader or listener roped in. He does a good job of it. Like it's interesting, but once you kind of like, if you recognize that pattern of storytelling, it becomes very obvious that like he's just doing that chapter by chapter by chapter. So
Yeah.
but it's good. It's entertaining. They're making a film out of it. It's going to have Ryan Reynolds in it, I believe, and I do think it will make an excellent film. So
Interesting.
yeah. What do you got next?
My next one, another one that I don't have with me, is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield.
I think you've talked about this before.
I have talked about it before. It was a book that I read early on when I was kind of starting to read more. I read it when I worked at the gym, and I don't have a copy because I loaned it to someone that trained there and then stopped training there,
Love that.
and I never got it back. So
The book thief.
as a common theme with loaning books.
Yep.
But it's a historical fiction, and it recounts the Battle of Thermopylae, which was the Greeks and the Persians. I believe that was during the Peloponnesian War. But it's told through the eyes of I believe he was a slave or non-citizen of Sparta, but lives in. He's with the Greeks and was captured by the Persians, and he's kind of retelling his life, the Greeks preparing for this battle, things of that nature. And I just remember it being really, really moved by it and really enjoying it. Similar to what I was saying about Dune and, sci-fi, historical fiction is not really a genre that I read a lot of. I don't know if I would get as much out of it now. It's been 5 years.
Wow. Yep.
Give or take, since I read it.
Yeah.
So, but I really enjoyed it. It's a good story. So
Cool.
don't have much more to say about it besides that.
When did that come out?
98.
Okay. Well, here's another work from the 90s. Actually, this might have been written in the 80s and the movie came out in the 90s. 1990, right on the dot. So this is, and maybe not a huge surprise, but Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I noticed that we both have a lot of sci-fi on our list today. Just not a genre that either of us read a lot of. I think if you look at what you and I typically read, I would say for me, I read a lot of 20th century stuff about political conflict.
Yeah.
Large conflicts, war, political strife, that kind of thing. You tend to read stuff that's, I think you kind of gravitate also towards that, like post World War II.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit less specifically around like war, but like still a lot of stuff that's kind of like a social critique.
Yeah. I would say, broadly speaking, most of what you and I read is not necessarily like narratively driven.
Yeah.
I think we both appreciate a good narrative, but
that's not the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Michael Crichton certainly included social critique in his work, but he's definitely more of that like pop fiction kind of entertainment on the page type of writer. But he is a good writer based on Jurassic Park. It's actually the only thing I've read from him. I saw the movie as a child, so I was probably 8 years old when it came out. Literally gave me nightmares. But I've been a fan of the film, and I didn't read this until I was an adult. And the book is excellent, and the film and the book are good for very different reasons. This has like more of like almost like a horror feel to it, and kind of more clearly defined like good guys and bad guys. But definitely worth the read, even if you've seen the film a billion times. And it actually made me appreciate. So one of the things I loved about Jurassic Park, the film, is even though it's an action movie, it's very like dialogue driven. And a lot of the dialogue is picked up right from the book.
Nice.
Which is hard to do. We talked about like White Noise, the film adaptation. It's just like, it's cringy how they're just like basically reading lines from the text. It just doesn't work on screen.
Yeah.
That's not the case with this. So ultimately, I think this is kind of like, ironically, a critique of capitalism. And it has some environmental themes as well, which is funny because Michael Crichton was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a very smart guy, obviously, but he was like a bit of a climate denier. And he was like real tight with like George W. Bush, which is kind of weird. But he's dead. So I can't help but wonder like where his politics would have gone if he like lived through now. But just a fun book, really engaging. I can see why it was so popular, and honestly, an incredibly original story.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a billion terrible Jurassic Park movies now, but at the time, that was pretty
unique for sure.
Yeah. So what do you got next?
All right. My next one.
This is going to get us canceled.
Yeah. I do feel a little bit more comfortable using the term guilty pleasure.
Okay.
Because it turns out the author is a dirtbag.
Yeah. And is still alive, unfortunately.
And is still alive. Yeah. But a book that I have talked about before that really was like a driving force in getting me into being a more active, consistent reader. And that is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I found it to be similar to what I was just saying about Gates of Fire. I read it like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly very narrative driven. I guess it was the winner of the Hugo and Nebula Awards, which are science fiction awards.
Mm-hmm.
So it has some elements of that. It has some, I guess, soft fantasy elements, you could say. I found it to be a very engaging narrative. Similar to what I was saying earlier about Dune. It's like a 700-ish page book, 750.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read it in about a week.
Nice.
I just, was so caught up in the story that I really couldn't put it down. And I found it not challenging enough where I could, read 100 pages in one sitting or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, again, not much to say about the writing, not to say that it was bad. But I've certainly read more challenging works.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I've joked about this before. Like, I read this book, and it's about this particular copy that I have is, like I said, about 750 pages. I read it about a week, and then I think I got this and Gravity's Rainbow for Christmas.
Nice.
And I read this first, and I was like, oh, 700 pages. I read it in a week. I'll read Gravity's Rainbow next. I'll crush that.
Yeah.
About the same length. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah. Probably couldn't be too much further apart in terms of style.
No. Like I said, that took me American Gods took me about a week. I think at the time, Gravity's Rainbow took me about somewhere between 12 and 16.
Yeah.
So
sounds right.
But yeah, I just found it a really compelling and engaging narrative, and I thought it was a really enjoyable story. I'm not going to spend too much time praising it because, like I said,
yeah, if you're not up to speed,
dirtbag. But if you're interested in it, based on anything I've said, I would recommend buying it, but used so that Gaiman doesn't get any of your money.
Yeah, if you're not up to speed on what's going on with Neil Gaiman, some very serious accusations from multiple people have come to the forefront about, we'll just call it sexual misconduct.
I was going to say predatory.
Yeah, definitely. Not just think of all the bad SA-related terms, and that's probably apropos.
Yeah.
So, and they, not that I have some formative or formal, I should say, structure to how I analyze these accusations being credible or not, but they seem pretty credible.
They seem pretty credible.
Yeah. So the next book on my list is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and this is a story about a writer who is basically plagiarizing work from her friend.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some great themes about the publishing industry and some of its shortcomings, tackles racism, tokenization of people, I thought it was just a really fun, super easy read, but just a lot of fun. Definitely kept me interested to the end about what was going to happen. And I think some, kind of learned a little bit about the publishing industry as well. I've also read Babel by R.F. Kuang, which is possibly her most popular work, and I thought that was fine. It didn't blow me away, but I didn't think it was bad by any means. I did think this was the much stronger work. It's funny because anytime you mention this or Babel, we will always get comments from some triggered person that's like, oh, she's just like,
She's too woke.
She's too woke. So if you feel compelled to say that, please do, and we'll just continue to laugh at your expense.
It's good for the engagement.
Yeah. Again, I don't have like a ton to say about it other than fun book. Go read it if you have a chance. You could probably read it in an afternoon if you're a relatively speedy reader, or at least a couple sittings at most.
Yeah.
So,
okay. My last one, I talked about this at the beginning of the year. It was actually the first book I finished this year. Certainly not anything I feel guilty about enjoying, but just something was kind of untypical for me, atypical, and that I thought was really fun and unique. It is 2120 by George Wildsall. It's I guess graphic novel is probably the best way to describe it.
Oh yeah, I think I remember you talking about this.
But kind of this like liminal space puzzle book where it's almost kind of like a computer video game in book form. The protagonist and I guess main character that you would play as, it's like a computer repair person, and he/you show up to this office building, and one of their computers needs repairing, and it's just kind of this like puzzle to get through the building. And there's like locked doors and things like that, and you have to solve the clues to get the key code to these doors, and find your way into different passageways and hallways and secret basements and things like that. Like I said, it's certainly very unique. I found it a lot of fun. There are points where if you pick the wrong door or the wrong action, you quote unquote die.
Yeah.
And it's like, go back to this page to start over, type things like that. Certain instances where you can get like trapped in this giant, almost like conference room type space that you kind of get lost and can't really, you're just going in circles trying to find your way out.
So it's like an escape room, but in a book.
Kind of, sort of.
Okay.
Very unique in that sense that it's not something I would, maybe totally think about reading, but I saw someone on Instagram post about it a while ago and thought it sounded really interesting. And someone gave me an Amazon gift card for Christmas, so
there you go,
bought it. But yeah, really fun. I would say, like I said, it's kind of a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Again, not something I generally read. I've enjoyed every graphic novel that I have read, just haven't read a lot of them.
Yeah.
So
cool.
But really cool, really unique. Certainly a lot of fun too. I don't think I would say reading is the correct verbiage, but a lot of fun to engage with and quote unquote play.
Like a choose your own adventure for adults.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sure.
Cool. The last book on my list is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. And I guess this book pops up a lot on like Reddit with like must reads and is kind of like a social media darling to an extent.
Well, you're kind of a social media darling to an extent.
I am a darling.
You are adorable.
I don't, it's going to get crazy here. I don't remember where I even heard of this. I think it like popped up.
Well, it's got a red cover, so maybe you saw it somewhere and we're just like.
I think so, yeah. But it's a blend of, I would say, historical fiction, horror, and fantasy, which are
3 for 3.
Three genres I don't read a ton of. Although, depending on how you define historical fiction, that could be anything that I read.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's about this kind of disgraced knight during the Black Plague, and he's trying to make his way to safety/civilization, and kind of picks up some friends along the way, and kind of has to help them navigate. I shouldn't say friends. He's kind of like an anti-hero, basically. Oh, actually, you know what? I do remember where I found out about this book. I was looking for books that had similar vibes to The Last of Us, the television show.
Yeah.
Which season 2 comes out tonight. And this book was mentioned because, have you seen the show?
No.
Are you familiar with it?
Vaguely.
Okay. Well, there's basically, kind of like a father figure guy, and he's helping a girl like navigate this zombie world.
Yep.
And kind of similar, like you have this knight, and there's like a young woman or a child that he's kind of taken under his wing a bit reluctantly. Yeah, I mean, nothing that's going to necessarily blow your mind in terms of themes or underlying messages, but certainly a very engaging and fun, entertaining read. It's super easy to read, and what I loved about this book too is it has very large print.
Nice.
Which for me is great because my eyes are failing me. I got a prescription for glasses in 2007 after I got kicked in the face at a Halloween party. Nice. And I haven't ever filled it. So my eyes are really starting
Nothing to unpack there.
Nothing to unpack there. So this was good enough that I did go out and snag a couple other of Buhlmann's books, The Black Tongue Thief and Across the River, which I've yet to read. And I think he has a new one that just came out as well. But yeah, if you enjoy The Last of Us and you want a book with a similar kind of vibe, and there's no zombie, mushroom zombies, it's not Sporer as Gibson's bookstore calls it, but yeah, I think it's cool anytime, probably similar to American Gods, where you can kind of like blend genres a little bit, because it's not horror in the traditional sense, but it's not fantasy in the traditional sense. There's just elements of that, and it works pretty well. And I don't know, did I mention this when we talked about books for dudes? Because I would probably put it on that list. I mean,
I don't think you did. I know this is not the first time you've mentioned it
Yeah.
on the show for sure, but I don't remember if you talked about it in that episode.
I mean, there's sword fighting, there's bloodshed, there's some sex.
Hell
so,
yeah.
Things that dudes like.
Yeah. Dude stuff.
He crushes some beers with the bros.
Nice.
Watches some UFC. But yeah, those are...
Men will see that and just say, hell yeah.
Yeah. So my question for the viewers would be, if there are any books that you think we would like that are outside the normal books that we talk about, or the typical books that we talk about,
The Broderness slop.
please let us know. Is there anything else you want the people to know about you, Andy?
About me? Fuck.
Or about life in general?
Yeah.
Can I just say that
I'm probably the wrong person to ask about like life in general. It's funny. I posted something in the Discord the other night, last night actually. Just I was like bored I was watching the UFC and I was just kind of putzing between fights, and I made like a stack of books that I might want to read soon, and send a picture of it or whatever. And I want to say it was Mike. Maybe I might have been Buddy. I don't know. One of the regulars responded back like, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one that does this. You're making me feel normal." And I was like, "He's like, makes me feel good." And I was like, "It shouldn't. I'm not your litmus test of
yeah, just a bunch of enablers in here, really.
what is good and normal." And
yeah.
I'm you guys just
last week. I think we swore more than we ever have on a podcast for one reason or another, and I did a terrible job of editing them out.
That's okay,
because I usually just search the transcript and jump to that timestamp and cut it out, but apparently I missed like 6 of them. So okay,
well, this is a NSFW podcast now, so
apparently. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Join us next week where we will be talking about books that we would like Donald Trump to read.